Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. And today we're going to be talking about some media training. I mean, as podcasters and content creators, we are in front of the camera, we are talking to other people in virtual stages, and it's not about just showing up and talking. You want to have more intentional skills and make sure that you're resonating with the audience. So welcome to the show, Paula Rizzo, who is an expert in media training. Along with other things, your bio is amazing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to help however I can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that media training, like it's a very broad term. So how some people think it's just for like being on a TV show and how to prep for that. Like, how would you describe it?
It has changed because of the pandemic. So prior to the pandemic, it was
Yeah.
mostly people who wanted to be on television. Then during the pandemic, I was very busy teaching people how to do Zoom calls and how
Yeah.
to lead them and how to make sure your background looked good. Now we have evolved, and people know all about how to be on camera, but maybe not in the best possible way. So media training
Mhm.
is really showing up as your best self, whether you're the interviewer or the interviewee. You want to make sure that you, as you said, resonate with the audience, but you get to the point as quickly as possible, which
Yeah.
doesn't always happen. And it takes practice.
Yes, it does. And sometimes it's a point of like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of the overarching categories when it comes to media training? Like, I know lighting, your background, your voice, the mic, but I'm sure there's other elements that are important. So how would you kind of break that down?
Yeah, it's very much about, what you say, how you say it, your sound bites. How do you come across when you're talking? What are your headlines? How do you make sure that you're saying things in a really succinct and clear way? That takes practice. A lot of times people think,
Yes.
oh, I'll just do it. I'll get on there and I'll talk and I'll be fine. And then they go on and on and on, or they don't get to their point or whatever it is. So that's one big element is what you're actually saying. Then
Yeah.
how you look, right? So if you're on camera, what is your hair, your makeup, your outfits, all of that stuff matters. Even your earrings and your nail polish, like it's all part of your brand. People
Yeah.
will remember that now. People are in your homes a lot of the time, if you have a home office. So they're seeing the elements behind you. What do you want to see behind you? What do you want to show off? Because people will remember that too. So those are all the pieces really of the preparation. And then part of it too is how do you repurpose it, which I know is one thing that you talk about quite a
Yeah.
lot. But then how do you take that media interview or that podcast interview, or even if you're doing your own videos, whatever the media is, how do you take that and really make it worth the while to be able to do that? And I do a lot of media, interviews myself too. And then I make sure that I'm able to rinse it and repeat it. And how else can I use this? And how can I dice and pull it apart?
Yay, you're talking my language. Love it. And I do have to say, your background is spectacular.
Thank you.
Curious, what do you think of virtual backgrounds?
I'm not a fan. In the beginning of the pandemic, I understood it was fun to look like you were on Mars. I understand. We all felt that way. But unless you have a green screen and it's really like a real lit very well, you need to have very good lighting. It doesn't look great. Your hands disappear. It just doesn't look as professional as clear. And also, if you're an expert in whatever it is, you're podcasting about, or an entrepreneur, I think it sort of hides your authenticity. It's like, what are you hiding back there? What's going on? I
Ooh.
want to be able to see you in your environment. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, neither am I, but I've never heard anyone talk about it really, right? And
Mhm.
people are like, oh, if you're a podcaster, you need to have a virtual background that looks like a podcast quote unquote studio with all the
Ah,
equipment and the cameras. And I'm like, I wouldn't live and work in a room like that. That would be horrible to me.
it's part of
Um,
your brand. If
yeah,
that's what, if
personality.
that's, yeah, exactly. If that's what you want to go with, go for it. But
Yeah,
I just think there are better ways to do it.
I agree. All right, so let's talk about those physical pieces, I guess you could say, background, lighting, mic, how
Mhm.
you're positioned. Yeah, I would love for you to dive into some tips for the audience.
Well, you are the expert, so you want the audience to be looking at you and not distracted by the things in the background. However, the things in the background do add a little bit to, to this whole puzzle. So you want to make sure that there's some depth behind you, so you're not up against a wall. If you can do that, for a long time I
Hmm.
lived in New York City, and there was not very much room to do anything, and so I was up against a wall with with one painting behind me or whatever it was. It was the best I could do at the time. It's fine. So, you do have to take this with a grain of salt at sometimes. But do you have anything living behind you, right? Is there any plants? Are there any animals? I would ask that you remove the animals and not have them running around. This was very cute and adorable during the
I
pandemic
know.
to have your animals and your cats and your kids and as a television producer for years, I worked on TV for close to
Mm,
20 years. I was always like, I had zero tolerance during the pandemic when everybody's life
I
was happening
bet.
behind them. I was like, what is happening? Everybody, knock it off. This is a set. Get those cats out of here. I know cats will do what they want to do, but you want to
You can
level up.
control those things.
Right. You want to level up here. So it really is about that background. What do you want to show? Is it matching your brand,
Yeah.
so that's a big piece. If you have books, having your books behind you or your projects or whatever it is, you have awards or something that you want to show off. How are those visible in the background? If you have books, are they other people's books? Are they visible? Do you want them to be visible? Because people
Right.
will see them and so these are things you do need to think through. What are the paintings? What are the colors? You don't need to overthink it, but
Yeah.
if like I do a lot of media, I do a lot of TV, I do a lot of video. So I overthought it. And this is what I teach,
Yeah.
So I was very, very,
You're
very
detail oriented, I'm sure.
totally. I was very deliberate about how I set up my background. And if you're traveling, which sometimes people will do too, you need
Mm,
to be able to be versatile, to be, if your background isn't great, can you do something? Can you create some environment that works well enough? I don't want people to feel like, oh, I can't do that interview because I don't have my nice background or my nice microphone or my
yeah.
whatever. I want you to be able to do this wherever you are.
Yeah, that's a great tip because we do travel a lot and conferences and the like.
Sure.
Um, yeah, yeah. And you think about, oh, the books and the stuff that's in the background, but it's amazing what people will pick up on. Like if
Totally.
there's a book in the background that maybe is not appropriate or a mug that has like, some racy saying on it,
Totally.
like you don't think about it because it's behind you, but people will see it.
It's part of your office now. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And are there any rules of like how you should position? I know it drives me crazy when people are like way off to the side, only because I do repurpose content. And so
Sure.
when I am creating reels, I'm like, oh, I wish they sat further back. I wish one person's to the left and the other person's to the right. But that's me from like a technical standpoint. Do you have any certain rules of thumb?
You do want to be centered in the camera angles, and have a little bit of it's called headroom above you. So you don't
Mm,
want there to be nothing. You don't want to have your head cut off. So you want to have a little bit of room, above you. If you're doing an interview or you're with someone else, you want to make sure that you're matching with the other person if you can, so
yeah,
that you have similar setup. So the two of you look the same if you're doing this virtually. Not one is very close to the camera and looks bigger than the other one or whatever it is. So you want to just, those are things to be
yeah.
mindful of. But when you're sitting, when you're speaking, when you're presenting, to have both feet on the floor, to be at the edge of your seat and not be
Hmm.
sitting back, because it helps you to project your voice. Often people will say, I don't want to sound like a used car salesman, even though I tell them you have to speak louder. You have to speak louder than you think you do when you're
Oh,
projecting. Filling the room with the sound of your voice is a tip that I got years ago from a director, a friend of mine, and it was so helpful because sometimes people can come off as maybe they're like whispering a little bit or they don't want to, be too bold or whatever. It's like fill the room with the sound of your voice, even if it's just you in the room on your own, just delivering a video or whatever, podcast or intro or whatever it is. It really does help to up your energy levels and also keep the interest of the person listening or watching. Because if you hear someone who's monotone all the time, it's pretty
hmm.
boring to listen to.
I love that tip because I've never heard it being phrased that way. I know not to like, you don't want to be like monotone and really
Yeah.
quiet and you don't want to sound meek, right? You want to sound like you're passionate and you're confident about your topic. But I think that helps you visualize it, having your voice fill the room. And
Hmm.
so it will project more energy. And someone listening, like I think it's more interesting for the person that's listening, as they're jogging on the treadmill or whatever it is, to hear all the different intonations
Yeah.
and the power of your voice, if you will.
And when you watch it back, you think, and this is what clients have told me in the past, oh, I don't want to be a used car salesman. I don't want to sound too salesy. I don't want to
Oh,
sound too. And it's like, watch it back and see, because you'll notice that a lot of times the camera does, some wonderful things, but it also does some terrible things because it does kind of drain away, your energy levels. It just
yeah,
does. Same with makeup. You have to wear more makeup on camera than you think you need because it doesn't look like you're wearing any. It just
I
doesn't.
know.
So you really, during the pandemic, we learned that too. I had a friend who was a makeup artist for years, and she taught me how to do my makeup for video, and it's
Ooh,
different than doing it for every day. You want to make sure that you line your eyes and that they pop. So if you don't wear eyeliner, you probably should. Men and women should wear a little bit of
oh,
powder. You don't want to be too shiny, right?
right.
So there's some little tricks and tips and things that you can do to look better on camera. And that's what people, if you're going to continue to do this, it's the thing that trips people up a lot, right? It's the, oh, I'll do video if my lighting was better. Oh, I don't have someone to do my makeup, or oh, it's a million excuses why not.
I
But
know.
we can be self-sufficient now. We can do it ourselves.
100%. And it is a fine line of, not waiting for perfection. And it's like people want to hear my message. They want to hear me talk. They want to connect with me as a person. So don't be so caught up in like, oh, I'm having a bad hair day today.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's like you said in the beginning, you want to put your best foot forward. And that is such a great tip of putting more makeup on, like from a woman's
Yeah.
perspective, than you normally would. Because sometimes I do watch my videos and I'm like, oh, I looked fine in the mirror when I like brushed my teeth.
Yeah.
But now I see the recording and I look a little washed out. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, and then I kind of forget and have to record another video or whatever. But yeah, like not to be afraid to put more on because
And
it'll,
test it and test the look.
yes,
I mean, even today you were like, "Oh, that's a nice red shirt," and I was like, "Oh, thank you. It's not red actually; it's pink." And so I'm testing it. I wanted to see how it looked. What
right.
color does it show up as? Because I do wear a lot of red, and so people think I'm always wearing red, and I'm like, "No,
Oh,
I'm not."
funny.
But you have to test it on camera so that you'll know. Oh, I love that shirt, but it reads red when I'm on camera. So. But if I was in a professional studio and they were like professional lights and it looked good, it would be pink. You would know what color this
Interesting.
is. It's just that my lighting is good, but it's not,
Yeah.
as good as the professional lighting in a real studio.
But it is so weird that like what you see in a mirror is not necessarily what you see when you're recording in Zoom, and
Yep.
it's not necessarily what you see in the final product.
Hmm.
Like it's kind of frustrating
Yeah, it
sometimes.
is
You're
definitely.
like,
And if you're going to go through all that trouble of doing your makeup or wearing that outfit or whatever, I never waste time with that. So it's like if I'm going to, go and do that, if I'm going to do a podcast interview or whatever, I'm always thinking, okay, well, what else could I shoot since I'm going to be doing my makeup that day, or since I have that outfit, or since oh, there's some videos I could,
yeah.
pop through or do, to just make the most of it.
100%. So let's switch gears to like your voice or your body language. I
Hmm.
know it is tricky with Zoom because there's only so much of
Yeah.
you in the frame. And I know, I forget who I was talking to, but they're like, pretend you've got like T-Rex dinosaur arms. Like, but it feels like these hands are just like,
Come out
for
of
those
nowhere.
that are watching versus listening, I feel like you've got these big fat hands like at the beginning and it doesn't feel natural. Or
Yeah.
some people feel like, oh, if I stand and talk, it feels more natural, but I hate standing and recording. So give us some body language tips, Paula.
Don't um don't feel like you can't move the camera back. I think
Hmm.
a lot of times people just move that camera forward. It's so close to you, you end up just being ahead on camera. And look, if you're using your phone to shoot video, people are also shooting very close. You don't
Yeah.
have to pull that camera back and show a little bit more of yourself. And then that way, when you're talking, I talk with my hands, obviously. When
Yeah.
you're talking and you have your hands moving, it's a little bit more natural. It doesn't look like just like some weird, hands popping out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But you do need to be mindful of the hands, of too much body language. I had a client once who
Oh.
I would always joke with her because she talked with her hands a lot, and I even more than I do. And I said, "You look like your own sign language interpreter. Like it looks like you're doing it with the, it's. I mean, wow." So, she had to tone it down a little bit, but that happens. You won't know unless you watch yourself. You won't know unless you're on
Hmm.
camera and you see, am I always doing this? Am I always doing that? And with cameras too, like, I have an external camera that I use aside from just my computer camera because I think it's sharper and
Yeah.
there's a little bit of the light on it, which is helpful. But it's an autofocus camera, which means it will focus for you. So if you're flailing your arms around, it wants to focus on that. So you could go in and out of focus because it
Mm.
doesn't know where to look. It's seeing, things come closer to it or farther away, and it doesn't know where to literally focus. So you want to be careful of that too. And it's happened to me, where the camera will go out of focus during something or during an interview or a meeting or whatever. But now I know how to deal with it. So that's another piece to media training, doing videos. There's a little bit of improv to this too. What if something goes wrong? What if I get a
Yeah.
question I don't know the answer to? What if my camera starts acting weird? You do have to sort of just roll with it. And that comes from practice.
Yeah. 100%. Yes, sometimes tech is not your friend,
No.
as we discovered today.
Yes.
Um, so I find too, when listening again to my clients that are guesting on shows and I'm doing the reels and listening to myself, it's so good to listen to yourself. We all have tics.
Yeah.
Yes, there's the ums and ahs, but there's always like words that we say over and over again. It's just how we are. How do you control that? How do you become more aware of it? Because we are caught up in the conversation and the interview. And so you don't want to be a robot, you know what I mean? Minding your P's and Q's literally.
It is about awareness and about knowing that you do it, but those crutch words come up for everybody. Everybody has the filler word, the oh, so, because basically it varies from person to person where they put it in the sentence. Some people start with that, or I think. That I have tried to break
Mhm.
many, many people of because it undermines your authority. Just say what you think. Don't say I think. Just come out and be bold and say that headline point, whatever it is that you think. I always give the example of Renee Zellweger, who is an amazing actress, but when she gave her acceptance speech for, I think it was for the Oscars one year, she said, I think it was 46 times or something
Oh,
outrageous. I mean, she's used to reading off a script and knowing exactly what she's going to say. And so she was
true.
obviously overwhelmed. And it was so hard to listen to. And it was like, and here is a professional who speaks for a living. It's unbelievable. So, what happens when you know that you do this? So, you have to first record video of yourself, watch it back. Or if you're working with a media trainer, they will help you to do this. And then from there, what you have to do is simply pause because all it's filler. It's just that you feel like you can't have a pause. You can have a pause. So start to pause instead of saying, I think in the beginning of every sentence, or so, or basically. Stop, think about what you want to say, and then say it. It becomes a little bit difficult when we're doing Zoom interviews or meetings like this because then you step on each other, right? You don't know if I'm not going to talk or I am going to talk. So sometimes you have to play around with how much of a pause you can do before
Mhm.
people don't realize what you're doing. But it is good training for yourself to sort of pause and catch yourself before you say or catch yourself before you say,
Yeah,
It's hard.
100%. And you don't realize it until you listen to yourself. And there's so many podcasters that don't. And I
Or you have
listen
to
to
edit.
myself. What's that?
When you have to edit, that's when you notice it the most. When you have to edit, because you're like, oh man, I'm gonna edit all this out. I'm gonna edit all this. Why did I say this? Why did I do that? So that's it's good practice to edit your own stuff at least once.
I know, 100%. And it's like with my clients sometimes, at least you have an excuse. You're coaching them through all of this. But yeah, when I hear clients and I'm like, oh, you keep using that word again, stop
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to hear yourself, but I think it's a really important practice to cover. So with our voice, you've said to fill the room and pause more before you use those crutch words. Is there anything else that we can do to help our presence, to help relate to the audience, or sound and look more like an expert?
Well, pausing for eliminating those filler words is good, but also pausing for emphasis is good too. Because so often people will just like say what they know and say it really fast and run through it. This audience is new. They've not heard you say these things before. Let what you're saying sink in. Stop talking, let them hear the point that you're making and then move to the next one. So having those deliberate pauses, if you have to practice it, when you're doing this, I always practice out loud before I do a television interview. I know basically what questions they're going to ask me or whatever it is, but I will 100% be sitting here right before the interview saying my sound bites out loud, saying
Oh,
exactly what I want to say out loud. So I hear myself say it. And I'm like, I got tripped up on that word. I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to say this instead. And that comes from being a television producer because we would always be writing scripts or working with anchors or reporters or whoever, and everyone is practicing out loud. Everyone in the newsroom is talking to
oh,
themselves. That is how it works. So because you're saying the words and you're typing out these things for other people to say, you want to make sure that the words go together, that it's not hard to say those words in order. Then you check with your anchor or your reporter or whatever. Do you like this? What do you think of this? I had an anchor once who couldn't say the word especially. He would just butcher it every single time. And so we couldn't write it into scripts. We had to say
oh,
particularly, because we knew we didn't want him to look foolish. We didn't want him to get mad at us for putting that in a script. And so we would do that. I had another anchor once who didn't like the word hunk. He just hated it. Like if you said someone was like a heartthrob hunk, we put it in once and he
that's
was very mad.
hilarious.
So this will help for you to practice out loud, to hear yourself saying the words. I do this if I have speeches or talks that I'm doing too. I will record myself and hear myself saying it and doing it, so that you hear it, but also it's a good way for you to sort of internalize the information too.
That's true. And I've sometimes, just as another example, which I didn't realize I was doing it, but I record my little intro after the episode.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll like type out what my little intro is, and then I'll go to record it. And there's just a few words that I get tripped up on, and then I'll have to re-record it. And I'm like, nope, I'm rewriting that.
Yeah, right, exactly. That is the problem. I mean, I have two books about list making, Listful Thinking and Listful Living, and I read both audiobooks. I had to say lists a lot. It's such a hard word to say, and I kicked myself the second time because I was like, I knew that this was a hard word to say, but what can you do?
I know. That's awesome. Now, earlier you brought up the term sound bites.
Yeah.
And now I know what that means, but our audience may not. So can you explain what that is, why you need to create those sound bites?
It's a particularly catchy phrase, sentence, piece of information that you're going to get. So this is, if you see a quote in a newspaper or, a quick video from someone on television, those are the sound bites. So in TV, it's usually very quick, 10, 15 seconds, you get right to the point. And so the way that I teach it is as the accordion method. So you should have a short, a medium, and a long answer to every question that you're asked.
Oh,
So then that way, if you're on television, you give that short answer. It's a headline. You really, come out saying whatever it is that you feel bold about, you say it. If you have more time, you open that accordion, then you can give an example. If you have even more time, you're on a podcast, you can give the whole example, and you can give a second example if you want to. So to be able to have that and then gauge, where am I at? How much time do I have? Should I wait for a follow-up question to keep going? You can watch the host, you can see the cues and all that, and then you can open or close it depending on how much time you have. But having that in your mind, to those sound bites ready to go, so that it almost doesn't even matter what questions you're asked. You just know what you're going to say.
I love that, and I'm totally going to apply that to my guest talks. I love having like the short, the medium, and then longer so that, like you said, you are prepared. And sometimes someone cuts you off and you go down a different tangent, or you never know how the conversation is going to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. And being prepared with your talking points. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people will just show up on a show that they're guesting on and, oh, I'll just wing it. And whatever questions they ask me, I'll just, wing it.
Come up with something. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. But sometimes you talk in circles without actually saying the point. And like for me, when I'm doing those reels, I'm like, okay, this is really long, but I'm not getting the point.
Yeah, definitely. And you want to front load all that because, like you said before, if you get interrupted, or let's say you get excited about some other thing that the host says or whatever it is, and then you don't finish your point, at least you made a point. At least you
Yeah,
got to say what you wanted to say up front.
that's so true. So as you obviously work with speakers, podcast guests, people that are going to be on a TV show for
Yeah.
something, I'm assuming. What does that entail? Like, what does that look like?
It is very much about, self-discovery of what are you looking to do? How do you want to show up in the world? How are you showing up right now on video and in media? And then how can we prepare you to do it better? And a lot of that is, working one-on-one. I have an online course as well, but working one-on-one to be able to give you homework and do videos as homework
Mm,
or to do media as homework and then rewatch them together and say, okay, like maybe how could this have been stronger? Or how could we have worded this differently? So that okay, next time I'm asked that question, here's how I'm going to approach it. I know exactly what I'm going to say. And to watch yourself. People don't often do it on their own unless they have someone
wow.
doing it with them. So it's nice to be able to have a partner in that way. But yeah, I work with entrepreneurs and experts, authors, CEOs. I've run the gamut of people that I've worked with through the years.
Yeah. And I imagine you can bring these skills into anything. I mean,
It's
you just mentioned a CEO, like leading a meeting for your team or
Yes.
how to give a corporate presentation. I mean, there's so many applications where you need to be clear, concise, confident, and deliver the material in a way that people will actually understand.
Yeah, I mean it's communication skills.
Yeah.
This is stuff that you'll use everywhere you go, every person you talk to. You'll be noticing and watching and hearing people differently when they don't get to the point. You'll be like, "Wait, wait, wait. They went off topic and then we never got back. I didn't actually get that answer." You start to listen differently as well. But it's a good skill to have if you're in person with somebody, as well as in video. I mean, this has been amplified because now everybody does video
Hmm.
all the time, but I was doing video way before. I had like the first Zoom account. I didn't. It wasn't the first one, but I made all my clients back before the pandemic do media training via video, even
Mm,
if I was in the same city as them. Because I said, I really think it's harder to connect with a camera, as everyone has noticed and seen, through
yeah.
the years, than it is to be in a room with someone where you're feeding off of their energy and you're able to see, is this connecting? Are people laughing at my jokes? Does this seem
Right.
like it's working? When you're by yourself, if you're giving a webinar or you're doing a podcast on your
Right.
own, it's like, I don't know if anybody thinks this is funny, how would I know? But you really do need to just be confident and bring it and do it and hope that, it will resonate.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that part because I'm so used to podcasts. But you're right. When you're recording a marketing video or content video, it's just you and the camera. So you're not having that energy bounce back. You're not looking in someone's eyes beside your own and you're looking at your script. And
Yeah,
yeah, it can kind of look and feel a little bit stilted.
definitely.
How I want you to share how you can help people with their media and have better presence in their podcasts and speaking. I know you have some amazing resources, so I would love for you to share those for the listeners.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Well, I have a course called Media Ready Author. So if you go to mediareadyauthor.com, you can check out that course. And then I have a free checklist to become a go-to media expert. If you go to paularizzo.com/checklist, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor. So there's several courses on
Oh, look at you.
productivity. and list making there, which is my other expertise. And I do have a media training course on there too, but it's geared more towards leaders and executives. But it's still, a lot of
Yeah.
the same principles. It's just you just use it for different environments and different
Yeah.
places.
100%. And I'll have those links, of course, in the show notes for you. Thank you so much for your great tips.
Thank
I
you for having
know,
me. This has
yeah,
been fun.
absolutely. And I don't care if your shirt's pink or red, it looks gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. I appreciate you. And I know I'm going to apply a couple of those tips. Yeah, they were so good.
Perfect.
All right, folks, that is another fabulous episode to help you rock your podcast. And I will see you next week on the Leverage Your Podcast Show.